you today, and today we're going to be talking about some different strategies for implementing classroom discipline. So some different techniques that you can use, and this is a huge deal when it comes to teaching, because this is going to directly affect how the rest of your school year goes, and not just that, it's going to affect how well your students learn and how long of a career you have as a teacher. So let's get right into it. We're going to be looking at different things of discipline, and one of the main things that you should keep in mind when it comes to classroom discipline is always use the discipline management technique that requires the least amount of work. So that means basically if it's going to require a lot of work to implement, look for another strategy that's going to be a lot easier to do. Think of it this way: find the cheapest option that works. If you're finding something that you want quality, you're usually going to look for the best value for your buck, or best bang for your buck. And it's the same thing with classroom discipline strategies. You want to find the thing that's going to work the best, going to be the easiest to do, that's going to require the least energy and effort. If the situation recurs frequently, the price of management throughout the school year is going to be extremely high. If it doesn't self-eliminate, it doesn't matter how well it seems to work in the stress of the moment, it's a failure. So in other words, if it doesn't curb the problem, eventually it doesn't work. You need to find another method how to do it. We're going to look at the payment of being able to do as far as class, like what you're going to have to pay for a good classroom setting and for discipline. So there's two options. You can either pay now, and that will buy early, or that paying early will buy prevention, or you can pay later, and that's going to buy you constant stress and exhaustion. The only question then with that is how much or when and how much. So when are you going to start putting things into the problem that are going to stop it, and how much is that going to end up costing you? If you do it right and do it early so that you do not have to pay it over and over again, that's going to be the best way to maximize your longevity as a teacher. Fail to pay up front at the beginning, and you're going to pay every class period for the remainder of your career. That is not a very cheap option. So now we're going to move on to the focus of discipline management. One of the biggest misconceptions about discipline is that the most important problems in discipline management are the biggest problems, namely the crises. So a lot of teachers think, oh, I have this huge problem here, and it's getting just out of control, that's my problem. No, that is not your problem. That is a big problem, but your problem is that you haven't addressed the small ones that have led up to the big problem. So a way to fix this is to address the small problems. Big problems grow from little problems. And in the same way, small disruptions will become big disruptions. So if you have a big disruption that takes place in class, just understand that it's likely, very likely, that it has not just happened sporadically, but that there have been a lot of small disruptions that have led up to it previously. The most important and costly type of discipline problem in a classroom is the small disruption. Get that again. The most important and costly type of discipline problem in a classroom is the small disruption. Roughly 80% of disruptions are talking neighbors. So 4 out of 5 times you have a disruption, it's going to be likely talking to neighbors. 15% are out of seat. So another 15% are going to be out of seat disruptions. The other 5% to make up the last part of that 100% is going to be things such as passing notes and papers between classmates. Average classroom is going to have 0.6 to 0.8 disruptions per student per minute. In other words, if you take all the disruptions in the class and you have a tally, and you divide that up among the students, on average, each student is going to be causing between 0.6 to 0.8 disruptions per minute. Each student, that is. Between a quarter and a third of the class are going to be goofing off during any time. Typical classroom is not loud. A typical classroom is not loud and out of control. So while there are a lot of small disruptions, it's not like it's going to seem like it's there. It's just all under the surface. The surface is going to seem, oh, it's a normal classroom setting. However, if you dig very far under the surface, you're going to find that the teacher is stressed out, the students aren't learning, and that there's just a lot of chaos going on unbeknownst. Students are often too smart to be loud. This is one reason why it's not loud and out of control. Also, it's mostly quiet whispering to neighbors. Rate of disruptions increases rapidly when the teacher is immobile. An interesting study found that increase of 50% happens in disruptions when this teacher sits down in the chair. So if you want to eliminate a lot of disruptions, make sure you're standing and teaching in your classroom. Just don't give in to that urge to sit down to rest, at least for very long. Small disruption cause problems not because of their singularity, but because of their frequency. So in other words, if you isolate a small disruption, it's not that disruption itself is the problem. It's how many times that occurs that is the problem. So if you fail to eliminate the frequency of small disruptions, you're going to have big problems down the road. So what are the costs of small disruptions? Well, let's look at some. Number one is health. 50% of teachers have job-related medical problems. That's half. Half of the teachers have job-related medical problems, such as high blood pressure, acid stomach, ulcers, dental problems, chronic tiredness, depression, short temper, and anxiety. Teaching was found to be the second most stressful job in the U.S. behind air traffic controllers in a study done by the National Education Association. So get that again, it's the second most stressful, just behind air traffic controllers. That's pretty crazy. An average teacher makes 500 management decisions in a day. That is a lot of decisions. And you can understand after day in and day out of doing this for years and years, that will become very stressful and a lot of work. So that's why it's so important to establish classroom discipline in the class to make sure that those decisions are a lot easier and that they're not as many. By 35, many teachers are burnt out, and this is due to stress, which is defined as having to be constantly drained to simply get the ball rolling and keep it rolling. In other words, it's just the energy that goes into breaking even. This often leads to burnout, however, and burnout is just a continual exhaustion of working a job. Many teachers will burn out about roughly after 6 to 10 years. Common feelings of being burnt out, being let down, exasperated, frustrated, not supported, not appreciated, not compensated, and also resentful. The main myth about burnout is that it happens in 6 to 10 years. That's not true. It actually happens every day. Burnout is simply the end of the line. It happens every day, though, as a process of having this constant stress due to the small disruptions. There's also a cost of small disruptions for students, namely time on task. One of the first variable with that is allocated time. In other words, how much time are you setting aside, for example, math class, 30 minutes today. That would be allocated time. The second variable is engaged time. How much of that allocated time is actually being engaged and used by the student to learn and having time on task. This aspect this is important here, is most closely related to positive discipline. So if you have a more engaged class, you're going to have a lot more positive discipline. Makes a lot of sense. Third variable is success rate while working, and this aspect relates to positive instruction. So then it was also interesting, in an average classroom, 33% were found to be goofing off. And if you have a rowdy classroom, that number can be as high as 50%. So let's quickly take a look at what a rowdy or even a perhaps semi-normal classroom could look like. And just some of the different things that can go on unbeknownst to a teacher. And let's go ahead and take a look at that right now. Good morning, class.
Good morning.
What's up, dude? So today we're going to be taking a look at positive classroom techniques, and we're going to be doing our class today. So Sean, if you could put your feet down and join us here in class, that would be great. Thank you. So today we are going to be reading our book here, chapter 6. Jeffrey, could you put the water bottle over your back? Okay. So today we're going to be starting with chapter 6 class. And anyhow, it talks about, Will, this is your first morning on the talking, and Sean, yes. starting with this chapter here. It says back talk is artistic medium for students like studying students. Back talk comes in every conceivable form of a compliment. Yes, Timothy?
What are we talking about?
Timothy, if you would be paying attention, that would maybe help a little bit. Will, I hate to put it again, but this is your second one.
Oh, okay. Alright, who would you study?
Yes, Jack.
Who's president of the United States?
I believe it's Donald Trump. Now, class.
I don't think we got things
Well, if you don't mind stopping and putting the water bottle down, that would be great. Okay?
This one, say this one's a little.
Alright, so, Sean, hold away in class. Okay? By attempting verbal countermeasures, the teacher inadvertently instructs the game of Will. I know what COVID is. I'm sorry.
I don't want COVID.
Like learning chapter 6. Thank you. Now, class, we're learning. Plan management activities, plan or help organize learning sessions, provide suggestions for good TV, for the way to average, that is not a great suggestion. But you can also present a learning show on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Jeffrey, thank you. If you wouldn't mind just keeping your eyes straight up, that would be great. Will, please turn off the projector.
I didn't know it was something.
Class, listen, this is not acceptable. We are high schoolers. You've got to
Barely. You are talking to a senior class.
Sean, the second time I asked you to put the phone away. If I ask you again.
He's 18. How do you think he's working?
Alright, class, I want you to pull out your homework assignment.
I didn't How about emotionally handicapped junior high schoolers?
Alright, class, this behavior is unacceptable.
Excuse me.
Grade 1.
Oh yeah. Oh, I messed up. Oh, I still
This is not time for piano practice.
Hey, his piano teacher said he has to practice half an hour a day. Yeah. Hold on a minute. Wait. No, I'm in on this. Here we go.
I'm going to get the French room.
See ya.
So, as you can probably see by the video, things can often get quite out of hand when you don't incorporate the proper classroom discipline management techniques. Now, that may be a slightly extreme version of what could happen. However, often it does end up leading to things like that if not corrected or curbed. In conclusion, we're going to conclude with some of the problems that also occur with this. So failure to master basic skill is a byproduct of being off task each year. So this isn't just things that affect the teacher, this directly affects the students. Something that a lot of teachers often fail to realize is that most students want an orderly classroom. They're not wanting an environment where everything is crazy and they're not learning. Most students do want to honestly learn. Obviously, there's going to be exceptions. When the teachers protect themselves with good discipline, they will also protect the students. Some of the folklore of discipline management is that you're supposed to be fair, you're supposed to be firm, you're supposed to be consistent, you're supposed to follow through. That all sounds great in theory, but a lot of time it leads to the life as a teacher, which we're going to break down here in 4 stages. Life as a teacher, stage number 1 is ignoring it. Each disruption usually has its own reward. That's something a lot of teachers will fail to recognize. They don't understand that a disruption has a reward. And honestly, then the second thing that will happen is that teachers will then ask them to stop. This is stage 2. So after they ignore it, then it continues to go on, become a problem. So then they ask the student to stop. They will often tell the student to stop, and then the student will smile and be like, assure the student or assure the teacher that the problem won't occur again. So the teacher goes on with whatever it was or moves on to the next student. Meanwhile, the student now has free roam again to practice whatever they want to. And this leads to the 3rd stage, which is to ask them to stop again. The teacher will come up and say, Bill or Sally, I told you stop talking already. We already saw that on the video. I saw you stop talking, Sally, now, and this is the 2nd warning. Well, they're obviously going to employ smarter tactics. So now this time they will give them a big smile and probably turn back to their desk. They may even pick up their pencil and start working on a problem if need be, to assure the teacher that they are getting back on task. However, that often is not going to stop unless the teacher corrects these problems to begin with. Number 4 is, this is the last stage here, stage 4. Now we're getting desperate. So we lay down the law. We tell them just how it is. Sally, I told you for the last time, I've had it up to here with you. You're going to be spending an attention or whatever, no going home with your parents, etc., etc., etc. However, this is not a very effective way either, because for one, it's a waste of time. It's a huge class. Now you just made the biggest disruption as the teacher. All the students are going to be looking at the punishment that Sally is getting. Also, you're going to be spending a lot of energy for little positive results, I should say. The student, whoever it was, or the students that you reprimanded, they're going to get upset. Probably not going to work, and they may even think of ways to revenge. You as a teacher, you're just going to be even more tired, upset, and frustrated than you were before. And then finally, you're not getting anywhere. You're going to end up where you started. Same problems are going to occur over and over again now, and maybe even worse, because that student has a little bit of extra motivation. Some signs of being dead as a teacher: you're exhausted. You have futility, or in other words, it's just not getting better. Resentment. Often feel a lot of resentment. Cynicism, you just don't know what to change, or it's not going to change. And rationalization, you rationalize why it's okay for you to now quit your job, or for why things are going on. Reasons for student disruptions? Well, there's only 2. It's more fun than the assignment, and it's free. And you ask, well, how is it free? Well, let me explain. One reason it's free is because the students often know the teacher's limits. They know what they can get away with, they know what they can't get away with, and they will abide just within those limits. Another interesting study found that the teacher responded on average to 1 of 108 disruptions. So in other words, those 107 disruptions went unnoticed, or went unchecked. Maybe not unnoticed, just unchecked, and only 1 of those was addressed. Now you can understand why students often will get by with so much. Effective discipline either happens in the classroom or it does not happen at all. If you want a good disciplined classroom, you're going to have to start early. Ways to change? Well, there's 2. Retraining. You can implement new classroom discipline. You can also eliminate the small disruptions. This is the key. Eliminate the small disruptions. You're not going to have the big disruptions that will come on later down the road. And finally, implementation. A teacher has to establish standards up front. Then you can also you have to recognize it's either pay now or pay later. And oftentimes pay later is going to be exponentially more expensive than the paying up front of what you want in your classroom. So I hope this helped, and this gives you a good idea of how to look at some strategies to teaching in class. And thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed it.